Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Coach Drink, the Missouri Tigers continue the momentum in the transfer portal, landing another commitment from former Alabama defensive lineman Isaiah Hastings. And what excites me most about a guy like Isaiah Hastings is not necessarily the player you're getting right now, but what the player Isaiah Hastings could be when he gets into this program and gets developed. And we know, why has Missouri kind of come onto the scene in such a massive way? Coach Drink and this Missouri staff, that bar none, one of the best developmental programs that you see across the country. And a guy like Isaiah Hastings, who coming out of high school was a top 150 national recruit, had every trait in the world coming out as a prospect. And you look into the player a little bit more and why he hasn't played a ton at Alabama, was from Canada, moved to Florida for his senior year, hadn't played much football at the high school level. This is a guy that has all the traits that you want as an interior defensive lineman: a big body, who is extremely fluid, athletic, an 84-inch wingspan, a ton of length, just still needed to learn how to play the game of football. And you kind of trust that his 2 years at Alabama, he's kind of gotten that development. And now he comes to Missouri as a guy that not many SEC fans know yet, but could be a guy that a lot of SEC fans are talking about in the next couple of months, because the traits and the upside that you're getting with Isaiah Hastings is very, very good. Now, I want to talk about Isaiah Hastings, what he brings to the table, and more importantly, kind of want to have a conversation about how Coach Drink is building this roster. And for the Missouri fans that have been listening to some of these commitment breakdowns over the last couple of weeks, know how big of a fan of not only what Coach Drink is doing with this program. Obviously, that's going in the right direction. But more importantly, from a roster construction standpoint, I think Coach Drink is crushing it, right? You see the high school recruiting. Guys like Williams Winery and Trajan Greco. This is a Missouri high school recruiting class that is very, very special. But he's marrying that with the transfer portal as well. And you look at some of the top programs across the country, it starts at the high school ranks, but using the transfer portal effectively to supplement your roster is a very important aspect of the modern day of college football. And I think Coach Drink is doing it just about as good as anybody in the country. Before we get into Isaiah Hastings, recap a little bit about what Missouri has done in the transfer portal. Just want to say thank you to you guys. There has been just an overwhelming amount of support over the last couple of weeks as we've broken down these commitments. It's something I love doing. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, appreciate you guys more than you know for all the support. Without further ado, let's get into Isaiah Hastings. And again, the thing I'm most excited for is what Isaiah Hastings could be for the Missouri Tigers. You start looking at the physical toolkit and start looking at the check boxes, right? 6'4", almost 300 pounds. He has that. He has the ideal frame for an interior defensive lineman. But then you look at how fluid of an athlete, how explosive he is. I'd encourage Missouri fans to go take a look at the high school film his senior year coming out of Clearwater International. I remember talking about this guy when he's coming out of high school as being just a super upside prospect heading to Alabama. And I think Missouri is about to reap the rewards of a very physically gifted interior defensive lineman that can do a lot of different things. But I think he's big enough to line up at the nose, line up at the 3-tech, be a penetrator, provide some juice in the pass rush. And again, with all that length that he has, teaching Isaiah Hastings, who again hasn't played much football in his career, even going back to the high school level, teaching him how to use that length and how to use the athleticism that he has. That's where you're most excited for a guy like Isaiah Hastings. Now, I want to take us to this Missouri transfer portal class and talk about why I'm such a fan of what Coach Drink is doing. And I think it starts with Coach Drink looking at his roster, looking at the teams that you got to compete against, Georgia, Alabama, and saying, where do we need to close the gap? And we've seen this gap getting closed, right? We saw it with Missouri in 2023. Where does Missouri need to close the gap? It's probably along the line of scrimmage, right? And especially on that defensive line, losing some bodies to the NFL draft. Missouri and Coach Drink have done a really good job evaluating, all right, this is where we got to attack. And they're bringing in some guys that you have to be really excited about, right? Isaiah Hastings, a massive upside defensive lineman. A guy like Sterling Webb, who's from St. Louis, Missouri, started his career at New Mexico State. 6 tackles for a loss, 4.5 sacks, a 10.5% pass rush win rate from the inside, which is an extraordinary number for an interior defensive lineman. 14 quarterback hurries, a ton of juice from the pass rush, and then a guy like Chris McClellan. And for the Missouri fans that listen to our breakdown on Chris McClellan, I view Chris McClellan and Isaiah Hastings in a very similar manner. These are two guys that had a ton of upside as interior defensive linemen going into year 3. And that's normally when you see that jump for these kind of guys, right? When you're a freshman and sophomore, you're still kind of trying to be a grown man, right? Getting the weight on and getting that body right coming out of high school. Chris McClellan and Isaiah Hastings, both very traitsy interior defensive linemen that are going into year 3, really excited to see what they can do. And again, you're talking about a program that has maximized the talent on this team for the last couple of years. This is one of the best developmental programs that we see in the country. I have full confidence that Missouri and this defensive coaching staff, regardless of Blake Baker's in there or not, because that coaching staff has been very good the last couple of years, can get the best out of Chris McClellan, Sterling Webb, and Isaiah Hastings. Now, the next position I want to talk about goes to replacing a guy like Cody Schrader, who played a massive role in what Missouri did in the 2023 season. And you do it with two guys, right? We talked about, you scroll down to Marcus Carroll coming from Georgia State, who 5'10", 210 pounds, phenomenal contact balance, extremely downhill physical runner that was extremely productive at Georgia State. And one thing you can trust with this Missouri coaching staff, they know how to evaluate running backs who are coming from lower ranks. And obviously Cody Schrader coming from the Division II level was evidence of that. You bring in a guy like Marcus Carroll to help replace some of that production, who's more of the bruiser back. But then you go up to a guy like Nate Noel, who is a little bit more of a smaller back, but this is a guy that when in space is one of the best running backs in the country. You go back to his year in 2021 where he had 1,100 yards, 671 of those came after contact, for 62 missed forced tackles. This is somebody that you want out in space. And so you look at Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll, they balance each other out extremely well. And so you start looking at this Missouri transfer portal class, and obviously the #1 offensive tackle in the portal, and Caden Green, certainly another massive addition. Missouri's starting to check off the boxes that you wanted to see them check heading into the 2024 season. Really excited about what Missouri is doing, not only in the transfer portal, but in the high school recruitment rankings too. This is a program that's going in the right direction. Coach Drink obviously has a lot of buzz around this program. Really excited to see what they continue to do in the transfer portal. Wanted to hop on, talk about a guy like Isaiah Hastings that, again, might fly under the radar because he hasn't been that productive at the college football level yet. But he could be a guy that we're all talking about in the next couple of months. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys as usual. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.